name's Amber Butchart. Welcome to the Making Matters Levi's Digital with the British Council event. We're going to be looking at waste and the circular economy. This is part of the Conversations in Creativity talks for the British Textile Biennial. This is presented by Creative Lancashire, which is a service provided by Lancashire County Council. Apologies for the delayed start. This is a very 2021 event and we have a lot of tech things to sort out, as a lot of our panelists today are joining us via Zoom. So that was the reason for the delay. So apologies for that. There we go. Can't seem to get this to move along, so that's a great start. Okay, cool. So the event today is going to be run essentially in two halves. I'm going to introduce all the panelists, first of all, those of us here in real life in Blackburn Cathedral, and those of us joining online as well. Following that, Hannah over here, Hannah Robinson from British Council, she's going to be leading a discussion about the Making Matters Levi's Digital residency. Following that, I am going to be talking to Justine and Pammi, who I'll introduce shortly, about projects and research that they are involved with about waste, the circular economy, and really looking forward to fashion futures, to how we can use fashion or work with fashion to create a more sustainable industry, essentially. So to begin with, Hannah Robinson. Hannah is an architecture, design, fashion programme manager at British Council. She joined British Council in 2018 to curate, programme and commission international projects across the disciplines of architecture, design and fashion. She's developing global programmes focused on sustainable fashion, new materials, designer incubation and, crucially for today, the circular economy. Over this time, Hannah has developed multiple creative collaborations with organisations including Ellen MacArthur Foundation, Matter, Fashion Revolution and Design Museum. Hannah has a background in Design Futures, previously consulting for Impossible, a design and innovation group focused on planet-centric design, as well as leading a multidisciplinary team during her position as art director of the Future Laboratory. Joining us on Zoom, who hopefully you can see over here, we have firstly Temar Biratu. She is a senior marketing manager at Levi Strauss & Co. She's based in Amsterdam and has been with the company for just over 6 years. She's currently leading public relations, collaborations, and social media for the brand's Northern European cluster. Her work focuses on amplifying the brand, on product platforms, and values-based initiatives. She's responsible for developing key marketing initiatives and partnerships to drive the brand's growth while making a positive social impact. Before joining Levi Strauss & Co., Temar worked in the advertising world for brands operating in the US, Europe, and internationally. Theo is a London-based designer and an associate of store projects. The majority of his practice deals with understanding traditional craft techniques to the point at which he's able to misuse and reappropriate them. These investigations range from leathercraft, ceramics, and precious metals, amongst others. The projects are pushed further with the use of computer-aided design and manufacture. Digital techniques feature in his work through both input, like scanning spatial data, and output as well. We also have joining us here Frederik Deschuytter. He's a speculative research designer who forms part of Envisions, who are based in the Netherlands. Envisions is a design lab uniting over 20 multidisciplinary designers with a shared fascination for experimental research. Uniting as a creative hive mind, Envisions proposes a collaborative approach shared through an open dialogue giving an insight into the multifaceted creative process of design. In collaboration with renowned industry partners, Envisions critically re-envisions current processes of production, focusing primarily on the path leading up to the end product. Through this process, Envisions offers the industry new perspectives on materials, techniques, and production facilities. Joining us here in person, we have Justine Aldersey-Williams. She's a textile artisan and teacher specializing in botanical fabric dyeing. In 2017, she launched a comprehensive online training in natural dyeing, which has since reached over 2,000 students in over 40 countries. And she's a visiting lecturer delivering her curriculum, Make It Sacred, Regenerating Fashion with Natural Dyes. I actually did one of Justine's indigo natural dye workshops when I was here for the biennial earlier in the month, and it was a lot of fun. So I recommend you all have a look. Justine is the founder and regional coordinator of North West England Fibreshed, advocating for the reintroduction of bioregional textile crops, and is one of 3 partner organisations on the homegrown, homespun flax and woad growing project in collaboration with the British Textile Biennial and the social enterprise Community Clothing. We'll be hearing a lot more about that shortly. Also here in person, we have Pammi Sinha, who is an associate professor in fashion management at the University of Leeds. Having trained as a fashion designer, her PhD examined the fashion design process across the UK women's wear sector. This research led her to teach strategic fashion design management in various forms at the universities of Manchester, Huddersfield, and Leeds. A fellow of the Higher Education Academy and fellow of the Textile Institute, she's advised on fashion and textiles design and training issues for the Creative Industries Development Services for Manchester City Council, Tanzania Gatsby Trust, which is part of Sainsbury's Charitable Foundation, and the UK government DEFRA as well for their Sustainable Clothing Roadmap initiative. So as you can imagine, we have an awful lot to get through today, this afternoon. So at this point, I would like to hand it over to Hannah, my co-chair for this afternoon's event, who will be leading a conversation with Theo, Temar and Frederik on the Making Matters Levi's Digital project. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you, Amber. Hi, everybody. So we have Frederik, who is part of a collective called Envisions, who are based in the Netherlands, and we have Theo, who's based in the UK. So this has been a really interesting collaboration because it's all being done digitally because of the current restrictions. So we can also hear a little bit about that later as well. But I'm firstly going to hand over to Temar, and I'm really intrigued to ask her to answer a little bit about the initiative which Levi's run, which really forms the foundation of this project. So Temar, I'm hoping you can hear me. You're part of Levi's by Levi's. Could you explain a little bit more about it, please?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. First of all, thank you for having me. And well, let's start with Levi's by Levi's. What it is, it's a product range that celebrates sustainable product solution styles for the next generation. Levi's by Levi's looks to encourage us all to rethink how we shop by repairing, recycling, and reimagining our old Levi's garments for a new beginning. So we take our old or excess products and turn them into something new, all done responsibly and sustainably. And the Levi's by Levi's concept of consumption launched last year within our Levi's House London concept store, which is located in the center of London. And within this store, our customers can find exclusive capsule collections created using these principles. They can also bring in their Levi's garments to have them repaired and to give them a new life. We actually have several Levi's tailor shops across the UK where consumers can bring in their older Levi's garments for repair and for renew. So the platform itself, as just to summarize again, really looks into how we can encourage our consumers to rethink some of their shopping behaviors and just to
Classic. Yeah.
I'll fill in the gaps where I think what Temar was going to say, but essentially Levi's by Levi's is exciting because it's about really empowering the customers to be able to repair and reuse their clothing. Some of the images you can see here is the concept store called Levi's House, which is in London. And this is a space where, as Temar was explaining, customers can go in and can have repairs done, but it also functions as an exhibition space as well for a number of collaborations that they have. And to explain a little bit more about this project, Levi's have a huge amount of faulty returns and kind of dead stock, like a back catalogue of materials, whether that's pre-consumer waste or post-consumer waste. So that could be denim, it could be fleece, different types of textiles. And what the designers are doing to work together is to really take these materials and transform them into something else. So hopefully we'll be able to hear a little bit from them about what they're doing and some of their experiments. Do we know if we still have them on Zoom or if they left us? Still here. Great. Temar, I'm going to hand back to you. Could you explain a little bit about how the space Levi's House functions for the public?
Sure. So
Thank you.
the space itself is really designed with the customer at the core. The store is focused on a journey of experience. So the design was set up in a very modular way, which allows us to adapt the space to the different stories that we want to tell. All of the fixtures in the space are made from 100% recycled materials or upcycled materials. And we've integrated digital screens into the space, which allow us to easily explain special collections, as well as the three R's of repair, reimagine, and recycle. Consumers can also download short how-to videos, which focus on customization tips that they can do at home, which includes, for example, a pattern of a bucket hat that you can create out with leftover denim fabrics or any fabric, actually. We also have a digital donation wall in the space where consumers can donate their old denim to us, which we'll then use to either repair, reimagine, or recycle. And when they donate a pair of jeans to us, and if they happen to be a member of our Levi's loyalty app, they'll receive 501 coins, which they can redeem for a next Levi's purchase. The space also includes our Lot 1 platform, as well as an archive space. So Lot 1 was first launched in 2013, and it's the pinnacle expression of denim style and craftsmanship. This is a space where our master tailors will create you a one-of-a-kind custom pair of Levi's, which is made to measure. So a really, really unique piece. And the archive space is a fully immersive space where consumers can learn more about our brand history and our brand past, which is informing what we do today and will also inform what we do in the future. So it's a really experience-based space where consumers can take their time, explore, learn about what we're doing, but also, like I said, bring in their garments for customization or repairing, but also get some tips and tricks of some things they can do at home with their favorite pair of Levi's.
Thanks, Temar. Could I maybe just ask you as well to explain a little bit about some of the collaborations you've done recently? And I think an interesting thing about Levi's is you really engage with the younger generation of designers and are really, really great at kind of collaborating with emerging practitioners. And what are some of the recent collaborations that you've done, just to give us an idea?
Yeah, so collaborating with external talent and creatives is really important for us as a brand. Firstly, denim is the ultimate blank canvas that anyone can truly make their own. And having young creatives, young talent, reinterpret our garments into something new that represents a shared vision is really exciting for us. And secondly, we have the privilege of being a globally recognized brand with a very long legacy. So we love to share this space with young talent and shine a light on them and what they're doing. In terms of some recent partnerships, we recently partnered with 3 students from the acclaimed Central St. Martin's. These 3 students were given excess denim garments, which they reimagined into a capsule collection reflecting their design ethos and aesthetic, all responsibly made, of course. And it was really exciting to see them take our pieces and transform it into something completely new that we hadn't seen before. And we ended up with 3 truly unique collections, which we then made available in the London house store. And actually right now, we are celebrating Black History Month in the UK. And for this celebration, we've kicked off a month-long series of activities under the title of Rooted in Joy that celebrate both external and internal talent. So we've partnered with members of our Black and North African ERG Sawubona. We've invited them to customize trucker jackets that represent their identity. Again, all of them really unique and special. We also partnered with Uptown Yardie, which is a Black-owned independent clothing and accessories brand based in London, to upcycle excess fabrics into a series of bucket hats, which are very inclusive in that they're designed to kind of fit different hairstyles and different hair types. And both of these initiatives will be sold in our store, and the proceeds will go towards community outreach groups in London. And then lastly, for Black History Month, we partnered with one of our very own store stylists and multidisciplinary artist named Rahim, to create bespoke artwork that's on display in the store at the moment. And what Rahim does is he works with sand from his native country of Ghana, and he uses this to create artwork which reflects his roots. So a few different types of collaborations that we've done in the space to give you a taste. And of course, as a brand, we work on collaborations at a global level, but these are collabs that are really specifically designed for Levi's by Levi's and our London house store.
Thanks, Temar. And I think just finally, so, this collaboration is looking at circular design and looking at materials specifically. And I think what you've shown us through some of the other collaborations, and what I find really interesting, is it's really about moving outside the space of just fashion and garments, but looking at textiles in a broader sense, and the qualities of the material. And I would love to just ask you finally what you're excited about with this collaboration, but before we hear a little bit from Frederik and Theo.
Yeah, this one is particularly exciting for me because it's different to anything we've launched in the space to date. This project is not going to necessarily or won't culminate in a collection per se, which is something that we're more accustomed to doing, but focuses on the process of circularity and creativity through the lens of what can be done with denim and denim fibers. So I think the possibilities are limitless, or I'm hoping that's the case. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what the teams from both Store and Envisions developed. The output of this project is going to be both a learning experience for us as a brand, as well as inspiration for us and our consumers. So the output will be visible to the public in our Levi's house store next month. So it's a new adventure for us as a brand, and it's very much in line with the Levi's by Levi's platform. And because it's new, it makes it really exciting. So I'm really looking forward to the total outcome.
Thank you, Temar. Feels unnatural because I can't make eye contact with you, but I am smiling at you. And this is the first time we've worked together, and it's been a pleasure so far. And Levi's have been very open with the brand and the materials, so I'm excited to see where we get to. No pressure, Frederik and Theo. Okay, so I'm going to move on to Frederik now. Frederik is based in Brussels, I think he's at the moment. He might have just got back from Dutch Design Week, but Frederik is part of the collective which won the open call for this project. So we had designers applying all from across Europe for this opportunity, and I'm going to ask Frederik to explain a little bit more about Envisions, the collective that he's part of, because they function in quite an interesting way. And also explain a little bit about the creative brief, which we asked him to respond to. So, Frederik, could you just give a little intro about Envisions, firstly, please?
Yes, sure. Thanks, Hannah, and thank you for having me today. So, I am indeed based in Brussels, and I indeed just came back from Dutch Design Week. I'm a part of Envisions, which started out around 5 years ago as a Dutch design collective. It started when 3 recent alumni from the Design Academy in Eindhoven visited the Design Week in Milan, and they were all a bit disappointed because the only thing they saw on display were this very polished, shiny end products, which were almost always made by individual star designers. And as recent graduates, they actually knew that behind those very polished project on display, there's a huge journey, which we call the process. And the process to us is full of experiments. It's full of tryouts. There's a lot of failures in there, but there's also a lot of beauty. And as a counter movement against what they were seeing at that moment, they staged an exhibition 1 year later, which was called Product in Process. Basically, they collected a group of around 10 like-minded designers, and instead of showing end products, they showed everything but the end products. They all focused individually on a different material or a different material process, and they only showed experiments. And I think I can say it was quite successful, that first exhibition. And from there, the collective has kind of evolved into more of a design lab, which seeks out to work closely together with big industrial partners, mostly material manufacturers. I think a very exemplary project for the way how we work is the collaboration that we did with the Spanish wood manufacturer Finsa. They are one of the biggest manufacturers of woods in Europe, and they are a huge company, you cannot imagine. And as a company, they have a lot of knowledge about how to process wood, how wood is being manufactured. But at the same time, they have been for so many years looking with the same pairs of eyes towards this process. And for them, it's interesting to have a young, dynamic group of very experimental designers to come into their factory and kind of shedding light on what they are doing. And basically, that's what we're always trying to do with Envisions. We're kind of trying to untap the hidden potential that's being locked in industrial processes and in different materials. So when we read about the brief of Levi's, which basically asked to kind of discover the potential of their post-consumer products, we were instantly intrigued, because basically reimagining existing materials is what we're good at. It's what we like to do. So we were instantly interested in doing so. And something that kind of sparked our imagination is the fact that when people think about reimagining textiles, they always think about turning it into a piece of clothing, while we as designers know that the whole world of textiles is so much bigger than the clothing industry. And there are so many more things that you could do with textiles that go beyond a piece of clothing. So we wrote a proposal for the project in which we stated that we wanted to explore the potential of denim and textile in general beyond the world of wearables. And we really wanted to focus on interior applications because, of course, Levi's is a brand which produces clothing, but at the same time, they have, I don't know the exact number, but so many different stores around the world, which are all being decorated with all kinds of different objects, pieces of furniture, which could all potentially be made of denim. And so at the moment, we collected a team of 5 designers who are all working from their own perspective with the post-consumer Levi's products. And I think the end results are going to be very diverse. There's people who are kind of staying within the idea of textiles, soft materials, moving more towards rugged, etc. And there's other designers who are more moving towards static materials, which could be constructive or which could be turned into hard products. So I think the end result of this collaboration is really going to spark people's minds of what is possible with denim in general. So I'm really excited about that.
Thank you, Frederik. So because of the current restrictions that we're under, Frederik and his collective unfortunately can't travel to the UK, to the Levi's distribution centre. So they have been collaborating with Theo and his team in the UK called Store to really be the eyes and ears and test and experiment for them and collaborate together, because a lot of this project is also about international exchange and collaboration. So I'm now going to move to Theo and just ask him to explain a little bit about Store and some of the experiments that you guys have been working on so far.
Sure. I'm hoping you guys can hear me all good.
Yes.
I'm part of Store, and we are a group of artists, designers, practitioners who've been operating for 8 years now. And we have a shared goal, which is just to get increased participation in design effectively, and the creative arts. So we work with a lot of school children around London and further afield as well. And try and just get them excited about making things, whether that's anything to do with denim or any other casting technique or drawing and all the rest. I think if we see a few of the slides at the moment, you can kind of see how we're starting to tackle this project. We think of denim, and kind of Frederik's kind of outlined it, that we think of it as this pliable, soft material that has no structure, and in which you create form through patterning, through like cutting certain shapes and folding and stitching. And so here in these first studies, what we're trying to do is just challenge those ways in which you can create form, and then later on we'll apply them to some kind of like, who knows yet, but other objects. And so in these tests, we're kind of using denim even as kind of like a monolithic block, and kind of experimenting whether you might even be able to get volume out of these things through just the lamination of denim layers. And then also on a couple of other slides, you can kind of see some of the other experiments that we're doing, which is turning denim back into like its original form, which is, of the cotton plant, it's cellulose, and cellulose is used for many other things, including paint or paper, for instance, or even like those egg cartons that we're all familiar with. So like we're just trying to kind of open up all of these doors and seeing where we'll land. And then I guess alongside that, there's maybe like one more study that we're looking into as well, which is mycelium, and how one of the great things about Levi's and about denim is so much of it is actually still made of close to 100% cotton, if not 100% cotton. So as a natural material, there's a lot of opportunity there to start reintroducing other natural processes, like mycelium, which is a mushroom that will grow into a substrate and take on the form that you give that substrate to make a new product that is the same shape as what you started with, but in a different material that is kind of mushroom fibers, if you like.
Thank you, Theo. I love these images. They're almost like creatures, some of them, aren't they? And I think it's really interesting to hear that cross-disciplinary approach that you're taking in terms of taking theories and practices from science or nature or different kind of areas and applying it to denim. So I'm just about time, so I'm going to move on to I just have a couple of questions for everybody. Obviously, the kind of heart of this project is about circular design. Why do you think it's important at the moment for designers to really look at circular design principles of keeping materials in transition and keeping them in use? And how have you approached this? I'm putting this out to all of you, Theo, Frederik, Temar, any of you that would like to answer.
I mean, I can kick things off maybe. I think what's so great about this project is how our end goal is still so loose, and that we're doing these experiments. We're not quite sure exactly where we're going to end up yet, and that means that we're not necessarily defined to making a piece of clothing or having it be something that you could wear or be recognizably cloth, for instance. And that for me is one of the huge opportunities of circular design, is that these things can be cross-discipline, cross-industry. So for instance, if you take a CD, for instance, that needs to be made of a certain quality of plastic, for instance. But for us, like Frederik and I, we could kind of use that plastic in a much more different way and create other things that don't necessarily need that kind of quality of plastic, but to make other things.
Yeah. Does anyone want to add anything? Frederik?
Also, I think it's not a debate anymore. I think every single designer right now realizes that the materials and the resources that we're using are not endless. I mean, why should we still make products from virgin materials if there is such a large source of already used materials? I mean, I honestly think that in hopefully like 10 years, we will look back at the system and how it is today and think to ourselves, like, how did we at that moment think that was normal or that is good? So I think we're really not anymore in the beginning, but we're like in the middle of a shift towards a new kind of attitude towards materials, and recycling and circular design are at the heart of that shift.
Yeah. I think just to add a bit more detail as well, the brief that Theo and Frederik's team are responding to is also to create a physical exhibition in Levi's house, the space that we saw, but that also has to have a second life. So they're also designing that now so that the whole installation exhibition will also move somewhere else. And obviously it wouldn't be very in keeping with the theme if that was then, just went to waste. So I think it's really interesting, when we're at the biennial today, to think about the afterlife of exhibitions. I think there's a lot of really interesting new examples of this kind of coming to the forefront all around the world at the moment, even if you think of festivals like Burning Man or the way that a lot of things are assembled to be designed for disassembly as well. So that's another part of the brief that they are approaching too. Just finally, a really kind of key part of this project is also about engaging the public around research and development, making the idea of making and repair a lot more accessible. And I just wanted to ask each of the panel members, finally, what kind of legacy outcome they would like to see from this project specifically, and could it perhaps make us think about how we look after our clothing differently, or what would they like to see as a follow-on from this piece of work?
I think I can jump in first, maybe from a Levi's point of view. As I mentioned before, the projects we've done in the past have resulted in a capsule clothing collection that we've made available to the public. And for us, you know, the legacy from this project is for us to take on the learnings or key findings of the exploratory and see how we can adapt this to different parts of what we do. I get really excited when Frederik mentions that, you know, the denim can be used, for example, for fixtures in stores. You know, things of that nature can be big unlocks for us as a brand. So that's what I'm hoping to see out of all of this. But yeah, this, let's wait a few weeks to discover more.
Frederik or Theo? Frederik?
Yes, I think the ultimate goal for me in this project is to kind of show people the possibilities of materials. And when you think about reusing or recycling a material, you shouldn't necessarily restrict yourself to the industry where it's coming from. And I mean, I think that in the end, in the exhibitions, there's going to be a couple of ideas that could be interesting for Levi's, but I hope that there's even more ideas that will be interesting for so many more people. And I really hope to inspire everyone who sees the exhibition and kind of open up their minds about the possibilities of materials.
I mean, I'll just quickly piggyback on the back of what Frederik said as well, that I think for us, it's really about just, there are so many opportunities out there, so many different waste streams or that can become actual really beautiful objects that we have in our spaces. So hopefully we just give people a new perspective on these things that would otherwise go to waste.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for joining. I'm now going to pass over to Amber for the second part of the panel, but invite you, Temar, Theo, and Frederik to stay on the line if you can and listen in. And thank you so much. The exhibition will be launching towards the end of this year, so everybody can kind of keep updated on the Levi's by Levi's project, and time for Frederik and Theo to carry on and get going. Thank you.
I think I just need the clicker. Thanks so much. And we will be taking some questions from the audience at the end as well. So thank you, Theo, Frederik, and Temar. And if you don't mind, we might have some questions for you at the end as well. So thank you. Okay, Justine, Pammi. Now, both of you work in really exciting ways in areas to do with the circular economy, and regenerative clothing. Maybe, I'll see how it goes. Thank you. But I'm really aware that these are quite new terms. These are terms that not everybody is familiar with. So firstly, Pammi, could you please explain what exactly the circular economy is?
Okay, sure, I can try. So the philosophy of circular economy is really about trying to maximize the use of anything, whatever's out there. So resource efficiency, making sure that we make use and lengthen the use of materials that are already in existence. So we do that, but with a business model kind of thinking. So it's very much about combining economics with making sure that we make full use of materials in use. And it rests on really 5 principles, which are design out waste, making sure that we are building in resilience, so we ensure that there's diversity in people, in communities, and you know, lots of different opportunities or other ways of doing things. We also rest on making sure we use renewable energy. We look upon waste as food, and we think in systems, so we understand what the interdependencies are between different actors of a system. Shall I carry on?
Yeah, please.
So, so those are the principles, and then there are kind of like pillars that the the whole philosophy rests on. And so those pillars are really about the resource loops that we have. We try and narrow those loops down, so we make them smaller, so we have less input with the intention of having less waste as output. We try and make sure that we close those loops, so we try and do recycling. And we also look to develop new processes and new innovations. So some of those sort of lead into strategic approaches to circular economy. So we look at, as I say, new business models, new technologies, and collaboration. And that sort of leads to an awful lot of, and you'll see that there's a lot of very big sort of collaborative efforts being taken place by the governments and companies like H&M and the CNA, all looking towards things like recycling. And the collaboration is really, really vital because it involves lots of different people trying to do a lot of different things, all with the intention of ensuring that we make full use of waste. And waste is an absolutely vital area to be concerned about in the circular economy. So in a very small nutshell, that's how I would explain it.
Thank you so much. And Justine, could you elaborate on regenerative clothing and bioregional textiles as well?
Yep, okay. Bioregional to me means growing natural fibres and dyes locally. Regenerative takes that a step deeper, and it's a very exciting and hopeful potential for the fashion industry to actively regenerate our climate. So currently, I think there's about 150 billion items of clothing produced each year, 70% of which are derived from non-renewable fossil fuels. So there's a real potential for us to return to the way our ancestors did things, growing your own clothing, which is what we've been doing this year. And when it's grown within carbon farming principles, we have a huge potential to sequester large amounts of carbon from the atmosphere, bring it back into the soil, and nourish our environment. So it is a really exciting potential. It requires a real shift of mindset. You know, the earth doesn't need regenerating. Human behaviour needs regenerating. And there's a great film, if you're interested to find out more about it, called Kiss the Ground, but they were actually criticised a little for not acknowledging the fact that this regenerative philosophy comes from indigenous wisdom. So yeah, currently indigenous peoples make up about 5% of the global population, but they're protecting 80% of our biodiversity. So we've got a lot to learn from these old ways, and that applies to this country as well. You know, there are people farming here who understand these old ways and are returning to more indigenous practice. So for the fashion industry, it's a massively exciting, untapped resource, if you like, bringing these fibres and dyes back to this country. We have some gaps in our manufacturing potential right now, but that's what we need to tackle. So yeah, it's an exciting, hopeful prospect.
Excellent, thank you. Now, Pammi, we can see on the screen here some images of your work with Zero Waste Leeds and the Economic and Social Research Council Impact Acceleration Account as well, quite the mouthful. So could you explain a bit about what that is, what you're working on, and about what we're seeing here as well?
Okay, so with Zero Waste Leeds and the ESRC account, so that was a really small bit of funding from the government. So there's different research councils, and the ESRC is one of them. So a small pot of funding to try and engage the public with not putting their clothes in the black bin. In Leeds, we no longer landfill. Anything that goes in the black bin is incinerated. So there is still a percentage of clothing, so about 2-3% of the total waste that comes through the black bin still ends up in the black bin in Leeds. And the objective of that project was to try and engage the public to think about and make sure that they weren't putting clothes into this black bin. So it involved lots of workshops. We had a big event with the KTN, which is the Knowledge Transfer Network group, where we had the opportunity to talk about the project, bring in people who are also doing recycling, were involved in some aspect of circular economy. And then an afternoon where we actually looked at what happens within Leeds in terms of how clothes are part of this circular economy. So the map that you saw was actually a Google map of within Leeds, and what we decided was that although Leeds City Council do have a map which tells you where to recycle and everything, it doesn't really always tell you where the textiles bins are. So that map started out with looking at identifying within a defined part of Leeds, because the project was only for a year, where people could actually donate or put their textiles away. So we were able to make that map, and then at one of those workshops we actually invited the delegates to sort of say what they felt about the map and if they felt it could add on anything else. So we actually had an awful lot of interest in that map, and it was the one draw of the project, and so it now has not only where we can put clothes away, for the textile bins. So these are the collection bins. We've also got the charity shops, we've got retailers, we've got repairers, designers who upcycle. So we actually were able to build up this map of the circular economy of textiles in Leeds. So unfortunately that project is over, but Zero Waste Leeds have actually taken that on, and the Leeds City Council have taken it on, so they still sort of work very closely with the circular economy of clothes.
Fantastic, that's great. And Justine, can you tell me about North West England Fibreshed?
Yeah, okay. We're a collective of textile professionals aspiring to use regeneratively grown natural fibres and dyes. We are part of an international organisation, one of 45 regional collectives now, and the umbrella organisation was founded by a natural dyer called Rebecca Burgess in California about 10 years ago. She wanted to address the issues of social and environmental exploitation happening in these lengthy supply chains involved in the fast fashion industry. So she sourced her entire wardrobe from a 150-mile radius of her home over the course of a year, growing it and finding local producers. And from that, the Fibreshed movement sprang up. Here in the Northwest, we've got a lot of wool producers, have massive issues around the value of wool, so that's something that needs to be tackled next. But yeah, we're kind of just building a conversation, building interest from people who want to contribute. I think that the key for me with regenerative practice is you're asking, what can I give, rather than what can I take? And we're shifting from this extractive consumer mindset towards a more restorative, regenerative mindset. So yeah, there's a lot of Zoom meetings and discussions, and even people who aren't producers are advocating for us and just getting involved in the conversation, because we all kind of want to see this shift. So, yeah,
excellent. And we'll hear a bit more about that in practice shortly. But Pammi, again, oh, there we go. No. Can we just move it on to the slide that was directly after the one we were just on, if that's possible? The click is not really working brilliantly. Anyway, that one stopped there. Thank you very much. Pammi, these images relate to some work that you've been doing on a project in Colombo in Sri Lanka. Can you talk me through these pictures and your work that you've been doing there, please?
Yeah. Okay, so this was from a project around about the same time. It was a project based in Colombo. We were looking to develop a database for waste textiles. That was the intention. But when we got there, we realised it was really ambitious. So, so what we did was we wanted to sort of actually understand post-consumer textile waste and how it actually arrived there. That had always been part of the project, but we hadn't realised just how big a job that actually was. So fortunately for me, I was out there 2 weeks before lockdown actually happened in England. So I somehow managed to get an awful lot of interviews done within those 2 weeks. So I worked with a partner in Colombo, and we were able to visit the landfill site out there, and we interviewed an awful lot of companies and micro companies right through to the big conglomerates who are in the export processing zone. And what we discovered was actually post-consumer textile, there's a really difficult line between post-industrial and post-consumer. So we were able to, again, plot out a map, basically with a flow diagram of where textile waste actually came from. And we also did a consumer survey of what people actually do with their textiles once they're finished with it. So that flow diagram with the numbers in it, that was really just to represent the results of the survey. And what we discovered really was that, okay, majority of people prefer to donate. There's no collection service for textiles or waste textiles in Sri Lanka, like many developing nations. I mean, we don't have door-to-door collections of textiles, so there's no source separation as such from here, but we do have a much more structured approach to waste textiles, because, we go to the charity stores, there's collection bins, in the supermarkets or on the street corners. There's none of that out there. So if they don't donate to family, friends and servants who work with them, it will go in the bin because there's nowhere else for it to go. And the waste infrastructure out there is very limited. So it's quite old trucks, and sometimes they don't operate. So if the trucks don't arrive, then they will bury it, the textiles, or they'll, maybe just leave it on the open ground, or most often they'll burn in open air. So actually we discovered that there's the picture of me in the landfill site is with that pile of clothing and that whole, because landfills, when organic waste rots and it leaves the plastic and textiles, in the landfill area, they do have waste pickers who come collect all the bits from the landfills. So things that they know can be resold or recycled, or they've got a market value for, those will be picked up. And what you'll see on most landfills is textiles that, because there is nowhere for it to go, or they don't know where it can go. And textile recycling is a really complicated and complex thing. So you have to know what the materials are, and you have to be sure that that's what you think is in there. So it's quite a laborious process, really. So it ends up just sitting on the landfill like that. And as you can see, that the person in yellow is me. So I'm not very tall. I'm only 5'3". But that pile up there is at least double, maybe. There's a good, twice as tall as I am. And as I say, I know I'm not very tall, but still, it's still quite a height. So if you imagine that that's actually only a fraction of the amount of waste textile that could be used, it's absolutely staggering, really, how much there is of it. So that's what that project actually ultimately ended up as. So I am actively looking to try and see, how I can take it forward. But that's unfortunately where we had to leave it. So.
Thank you. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Justine, could you tell us about the Homegrown Homespun project, please?
Yep. It's a collaboration between myself as the founder of North West England Fibreshed, Laurie Peake and the brilliant team at Super Slow Way, who organised the British Textile Biennial, and Patrick Grant and his social enterprise Community Clothing. And we are building a regenerative textile system here in the Northwest. We've begun this year by, as you can see, planting a field of flax and woad. And we have grown our own indigo linen denim in the last 6 months. So the intention is, by the next Textile Biennial, to bring a line of jeans to market through Community Clothing. And really this prototype year, the intention is to raise awareness of how incredibly difficult it is to work ethically and sustainably in this country. There's no linen spinning or processing facilities in the country at all. We've had to do everything by hand. We were deliberately ambitious so we could flag up all of these difficulties. Why shouldn't we be able to do what our ancestors did for thousands of years before us? So we've been through an incredible process this year, working with our local community, who have been brilliant and worked tirelessly through every stage of this, from seed to fabric, where we are right now. And yeah.
And so what stage are you at right now? We can see you tilling the fields. Is that? I don't mean, we've sort of even lost the terminology around this. They're working with the flax and woad plants that have been grown. They've been harvested. What stage are we at now?
We have a piece of denim, and the plan was to make a small garment out of it. Then a denim history book was published. I thought we'd created this unique piece of cloth. I see our cloth on the cover of this book, but it's the original denim from the 1700s. So it was a real moment. This denim historian said to us, it's really quite significant what you've done. It's a watershed moment in the industry. I don't think anyone in this country has grown their own denim for at least 120 years or more. He said, please don't cut that cloth. It's a real heirloom piece. So it's absolutely beautiful. It shows the struggle. It shows the kind of aesthetic of working by hand as well. It doesn't look like a factory produced, a standardized piece of cloth. It's totally unique, very beautiful. And yeah, we're keeping it in one piece. It's about to go up in Blackburn Museum.
Fantastic. And you're specifically working with linen as a fabric. Could you explain why that is? Like, what benefits does linen have in the 21st century?
It's got a very low carbon footprint, compared to cotton, which I think a lot of us know is quite a thirsty crop. There's the the Aral Sea has dried up because of the cotton industry, inland sea, I should say. So linen doesn't require any inputs. It doesn't require pesticides, herbicides, watering. We literally planted it. You can see in the picture, that was April the 23rd. We're using a vintage seed drill. That's Simon from Flaxland, who was our guide in this process. And we didn't water it throughout the year. We were praying for rain in the first week. We were very glad when it did rain and our seeds germinated. But at every stage of the way, we are learning that we're now co-creating with nature. We're not in charge. So it's a real relationship, coming back into harmony, coming back into balance, and as a species, understanding our place in the ecosystem rather than constantly dominating and extracting. So it's been a huge learning curve for us. And yeah, with many challenges, but many lessons along the way.
And what are the long-term aims for the project? And with what you've learned through the process this year, do you think they might be achievable?
Subject to developing this mid-scale manufacturing infrastructure, yeah, we'd really like to see textile crops reintroduced into this country, as part of the rotational system of farming. And when, as I said before, when farmed with carbon farming principles or in a regenerative way, there's a massive potential to draw down carbon, to enhance biodiversity, to increase wildlife. And we hope to create a system in the northwest of flax production and a small linen industry here, so working very cooperatively. And yeah, I can just imagine the audience in a few years' time sitting knowing that your clothing and your vote with your purchase has benefited the climate. And I think it's going to feel fantastic. Yeah.
Excellent. Pammi, you initially trained as a fashion designer. So how did your interest in circularity and waste management come about?
Okay, so my research has always been process-driven. So although I trained as a fashion designer, when I did my PhD, it was looking at process and the design process in particular, and the links between design and marketing. So in 2008, I had the opportunity to be part of this very big research for the Tanzania Gatsby Trust out in Tanzania, looking at the design and marketing capabilities for the fashion and textiles companies in Dar es Salaam. While I was in Dar es Salaam, the assistant actually took me in hand, and she was sort of taking me to do all the interviews. And she said, well, there's one place you haven't been that is going to get missed, so I'm going to take you there. And that was the second-hand market stalls. And we went to one where actually I couldn't see the end. It was so vast. And then, you know, there's a system in place in terms of, you know, things on the at ground level are very basic, and the higher they're placed, the higher up the market the value they are. But everyone's running that system, so it was exactly like mass markets over here, just secondhand. And it then made me think, well, we know where, you know, if we donate our clothing and if it, you know, we know it's got markets to go to, where does this go? So I had the opportunity to visit a landfill site a few years later in Dar es Salaam, and a similar scenario out there as well. So really that's how I became very interested in it, you know, because it seems to be a problem, and it's as much a problem of technical and business as it is of consumers. So it's a really juicy problem to be looking at. I've been very interested in that. So I think my first foray into that was through remanufacturing. So thinking about designers who upcycle clothing and the potential for it to be in lots of different countries based on traditional cultural heritage incorporated into the second-hand markets. But I genuinely began to see that actually the waste and what we do with it is actually quite a fundamental problem. So that was my route into waste.
Thank you. Can we go to the last slide, please? We just have a couple more questions, then I'm going to throw it out to the audience. So here, Justine, could you just tell us about some of the workshops that you're running as part of Homegrown Homespun, and also about what else people can currently see at Blackburn Museum?
Okay. Well, I feel like textile crafts are the bridge between farming and fashion, that this gap needs to be bridged. And so we've spent a lot of time sharing skills with the community who've come out to volunteer for us. And, you know, I'm really passionate that the skills like spinning, weaving and dyeing should be reintroduced into the educational curriculum as a way to teach children the difference between renewable and non-renewable materials, but also to learn how difficult these crafts are, how long it takes. You know, the piece of cloth that is about to go up in the museum, that's about 70 hours worth of hand spinning. So, you know, if you get people engaged in these activities, it really hits home and everyone starts to respect their materials and the products of those materials more. This is the Homegrown Homespun banner that we made over the summer half term. 18 hours, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and we first started spinning. We started with a bag of fluff and an old bed sheet that we tore up. So yeah, we spun the fluff into yarn. On the Wednesday, we naturally dyed it. On the Friday, we wove it. So we're teaching these really key textile crafts to people again, and we've been doing that as part of the biennial as well. And yeah, there's still the exhibition open at the museum, and there's a couple more events at our homegrown homespun workshop now. So I think there's a repair cafe taking place next weekend, and the exhibition is ongoing.
Lovely, thank you. Now, Pammi, from your research, I've seen that according to the Waste and Resources Action Programme, 47% of discarded textiles are currently sent to landfill. However, 93 to 90% of textile waste is capable of being reutilised, which is just a terrifying statistic. So what would each of your recommendations be for how people can really extend the lives of their clothes, but also discard or reuse their clothing more sustainably?
I guess if you're holding on to your clothing for a longer period of time, maybe not being so trend-led in terms of, and even if you are trend-led, understand or even learn new skills, because I think if we don't seem to have so many skills anymore. We don't necessarily teach them at school as much now as well. So I think that's a really important part. So youth clubs and things really become vital areas for those sort of activities. So holding on to clothes and being more skillful in thinking of, and reimagining, as we heard earlier, what your clothes actually are about would be, I think, my first suggestion. If you really do tire of it and you want to move on to something else, then donate. I think putting it in a bin is never the right answer, but donation is a really good option. Repairing clothes, again, that's part of the skills. So all of those sort of things, if you are already, have clothes in your wardrobe, things that you're not wearing, make sure it finds a home that it is actually made use of. Those would be my initial thoughts.
My sort of focus on this in my own textile practice is to make your clothing sacred. So I try and combine my former career as a yoga teacher with my current textile work, and I devise creative rituals that remind people that their true nature is nature. So I might take them outside foraging, we might dye mending threads, and then we'll stitch affirmations or mantras into our clothing. I've got a top that I've embroidered with an ancient tantric text that, for me, that feels empowering. I've invested my love and my care and my intention into that garment. I'll never throw it away. So in that way, it's kind of elevated from, it was just a high street top years ago, it's got holes in it, it's been mended, but now it's something that I'll keep forever. So that's my sort of approach.
Lovely, that's really nice. Thank you so much. And so I would like to now throw it over to the audience. Do we have any questions for any of the very esteemed panelists that we have here today? Yes. Oh, I think there's a microphone just coming your way.
I'd like to know the variety of seed that you use for your linen.
While you were switching your mic on, I was trying to remember. We had two different varieties.
Our village, the next village to us, is called Flax Moss. So.
Yeah, we had two different varieties. One, Malin Linen, actually in Northern Ireland, are reviving their linen industry, and they very kindly donated some seed that we used as a reserve crop up near Lancaster, and that was avian variety, which I believe is going to be what most people can get hold of next year. There was a real issue this year with Brexit. We had a panic that we weren't going to get any seed. So luckily Simon at Flaxland had kept us some. I'm trying to think, I think it's Lizette is the variety that he supplied us with. But yeah, there's variances in them. So the crop up at Monkley Gill, which is a regenerative farm, was a much thicker stem. So yeah, we're looking at all these kind of variances in our early stages.
Thank you. Any other questions?
What was the acreage to flax output?
Yeah, we need to, really analyse all of those figures. I don't want to speculate right now because I've done this before and my maths has been all way off, because there's a lot of wastage during, not tons of wastage, but in our early stages, because we're learning how to ret properly and all these different processes. That's something I need to now.
How big was the piece of denim that you made?
It's about 50 centimetres wide by about 1.26 meters. It's a little smaller than we envisaged, but we used a homegrown, homespun warp as well, which was quite brave. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Can you use the microphone?
Hello? Pammi again. You're hanging something on the line. What are they? In the picture?
Oh, I think it must be the...
Oh, the banner.
No.
Oh,
The
here.
left-hand picture.
Yeah, the left-hand picture. So the banner you see on the right is those pieces you see on the left.
Right.
There were 6 of them, and then they were all. We created the 6 panels over the half-term week, and then we stitched them together. People had also woven the letters. So yeah, it's all part of the banner.
So how long did it take you to actually get the material to do that, to generate it?
We did it over 3 days, so 10 till 4, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We had those 6 panels, we had all the letters woven, and then I took it away and I got my mum involved and we stitched it all together. Yeah, so there's a bit of extra hours stitching up, but mostly 3 days.
Oh, right, thank you.
I think we might have time for one last question before we draw to an end. If anybody has anything they would like to ask, yes.
Hiya. I found that really fascinating, and I just wanted to ask a question with regard to, actually maybe to bring in Envisions, and actually with regard to the future. And you talked about the time that it takes to go back to like the historical and heritage practices, and what you think the role of robots might be in terms of being the weaver, the spinner, or the farmer, but not in a mechanised way, in terms of how we undo 200 years of industrial revolution, but also advance.
Do you mean combining the best of our ancestry with modern technology? I mean, that's the ideal, isn't it? That's we have to consider all the options. I think from Fibreshed point of view, their strapline is local fibre, local dye, local labour, and they add in that it should be regeneratively grown, and that sets certain parameters. So can you have huge high-tech facilities in every region? No, you can't. So, we're working at a mid-scale, and that it means that you're working more ethically and sustainably. A lot of these really high-tech systems are located in other countries. Offshore, you see how vulnerable we've been during Brexit and COVID because we have no skills and manufacturing in this country for certain items. So, yeah, I think we have to look, like you say, look to the best of the past and the best of the future, but balance it within ethical, sustainable boundaries.
Frederik, do you have any thoughts on that as well? I think you mentioned bringing Envisions in as well.
I don't really know if this answers your question, but at Envisions we aim to work with big industrial partners, and we're always thinking about how the things we do can be industrialized. But it's very interesting how with every project we always start working from our own studios with very limited techniques, and then we always try to scale it up to big industrial machines. I think a future in which everything is done by robots is something which, as designer, almost scares me, because I think you always need kind of a human touch when it comes to materials. And even if you have a big industrial machine, having someone who has been working with that machine for a long time, who knows every little detail of it and how to handle it, can actually have a big impact on the end product.
Wouldn't be 2021 if there weren't some Zoom hitches, would it? So thank you for those fantastic questions. Really, really great. Thank you so much also to all of the fantastic panelists, Frederik, Temar and Theo joining us online, and Hannah, Pammi and Justine here at Blackburn Cathedral with me. We have some more conversations in creativity coming up this week. This evening at 6 p.m, I am hosting Breaking Down Borders, Movement and Migration Through Cloth. I'm going to be speaking to some of the artists involved in the Textile Biennial and some academics and other artists as well. Tomorrow, we have a roundtable on woke denim, style, protest and self-expression from Martin Luther King to Black Lives Matter. And that is co-chaired by Tuare Ndoro, whose work you can see up in the mall in Blackburn at the moment. Tomorrow evening, we also have another panel event here on the global impact of denim with some fantastic speakers, designer Craig Oldham, Tuare is going to be here as well, Harris Elliott, various people. And finally, Thursday, there is an online event called Cloth Connections, Colonial Impacts on Material Cultures of the African Diaspora. And that is conceived and hosted by Talika Kirkland, who is the founder of the Costume Institute of the African Diaspora, and that will be absolutely fantastic. So do come back for some of those if you would like to. Here in the cathedral, you might get a chance before we have to leave to see the Jamie Chalmers Stitch Your Story exhibition that's on now. It's a crowdsourced collection of stitched hoops, telling stories of migration and belonging. Through the School of Design at Leeds, Pammi is currently working on an Arts and Humanities Research Council Future Fashion Factory, which is a partnership exploring and developing new digital and advanced textile technologies. So make sure you follow her work to find out more about that. And as we mentioned, the Homegrown Homespun exhibition for the British Textile Biennial is actually on now until Christmas. Fantastic news, at Blackburn Museum. You can also catch my show for the Textile Biennial, Cloth Cultures, at the Haworth Art Gallery in Accrington on until the end of October. And there's a related podcast as well, also called Cloth Cultures, which features Justine as well as a range of the other artists involved in the biennial. And you can find that wherever you get your podcasts. Hannah, where can people go to find out information on Making Matters and Levi's project?
Thank you. Last but not least, so the exhibition will be launching towards the end of this year in Levi's house in London, which is just near Soho. And you can also find more information on the Levi's by Levi's website, as well as the British Council Architecture, Design and Fashion website. I'd also really tell you to check out the websites of Frederik and Theo as well, Store and Envisions, because they've got some super exciting work. Lots of synergies with the projects that you guys were discussing too. So thank you.
So thank you so much for coming, and hopefully see you later on. Thank you.